whereby the little girl said to the mother, "I will be quiet while you listen to Bishop Sheen, and you be quiet while I listen to Hopalong Cassidy." I think the way it's going to turn out is the mother's going to be very fond of Hopalong Cassidy. Well, as we announced last week, our subject tonight is economics. We might just as well plunge right into it, like the golfer that was on a course, and he said to some other golfers, he said, "Do you mind if I play through? I just heard my wife is seriously ill." An economist has been described as one who reads a menu from right to left. He is also one who has a Phi Beta Kappa key on his watch chain, but no watch. Really, the science of economics today is, for the most part, a science of description. It merely tells us how economic processes such as consumption and production and exchange take place. But economics rarely has principles outside of itself, whereby we may judge economics. That is one of the reasons why it is difficult to tell which system of economics is right, communist or the economics of our Western world. I once heard of read a play of Chesterton's called Magic, in which there was a duke who was asked to write 2 checks, or he actually wrote 2 checks. One was to build a saloon. The other was to aid the league that was trying to prevent the building of the saloon. And do you know that he became known in the community as a very liberal-minded man? He had no principles by which to judge economic processes. So lesson number 1 in economics begins with this simple notion. Economics is concerned with the science of having. All having is necessary to us because of our creatureliness. We must have in order to complement our imperfection. Because we do not have perfect life, we have to have food. Because we do not have perfect truth within ourselves, we have to have schools and education. Even because our hearts are rather imperfect, we have to have love to complement that imperfection. When God created the world, having came into the world. Up until then, when there was only God, there was just being, but no having. God has nothing. Therefore, he's infinitely poor. But God is everything. Therefore, he is infinitely rich. All having is something extrinsic to ourselves, for the mere fact that it complements us. And hence anything that we may have in the way of property is something that we actually could lose. And it's very easy for people to confuse having something and being something. Because they have things of value, they think therefore they themselves must have value. Does not necessarily follow. A woman who has a tremendous amount of clothes but never enough closets may think that she really is somebody because she's a clothes horse. Say, incidentally, why do they call woman a clothes horse? I've never been able to figure that out. Is it because she's always nagging her husband? Having is concerned with property. Now, property is of 2 kinds. Property may be either real property, or it may be token property. Real property, chalk, cabbages, spinach, ice cream, beds, land. Token property is an artifice or a symbol that stands for real wealth. stocks, bonds, credit, money that has been folded, and money that has not been folded. There is a natural limit to all real wealth. That is to say, a man, for example, does not want an infinite suit of clothes. There isn't anybody that wants his bedroom just chock full of beds, unless he's fond of a lot of bunk. Real wealth, because it is physical and concrete, sets limits to oneself and to what we can consume, and even in a farm to what one can produce. In Australia, there were some primitive people who could count only up to 3, and they used to count 1, 2, 3, enough. And why? Simply because they killed 3 birds. Well, that was all they could consume in a day. They had no refrigerator. I said they were primitive people. On the contrary, well, I might say as regards real wealth, that is why agriculture is one of the very natural avocations of man, is because nature sets limits to what will be produced, as man's own nature sets limits to what will be consumed. But token wealth, that can be infinite. We can just have a chain of hotels, more and more of this, and that even applies to communists. Because remember, a communist has envy of token wealth. A communist is an involuntary poor man. He's a rich man without any, poor man without any money in his pockets. He's a poor man who wants to be rich. And this desire for more and more and more has actually become a kind of an American god. A false god. Token wealth can be infinite, and therefore take the place of the true God. Remember when our blessed Lord multiplied the loaves and the fishes, fed the 5,000? The gospel says each man had as much as he would. Each man had his fill. Why? Because there was a natural limit to the number of loaves of bread he could eat and to the fish he could eat. But suppose that our blessed Lord went around and distributed $10,000 war bonds. Can you imagine any one of those 1,000, 5,000 saying, "Satis est Domine, that's enough, O Lord, no more, just one"? Now we come to the basic principle of property, which applies to both real and token property. The right to property is personal. The use of property is socially conditioned. These two principles must never be separated. The right is personal. Man must have private property because a man can work better on that which is his own than on that which belongs to someone else. Painter can certainly paint better on his own canvas. Farmer works better on his own land than on someone else's. Just think of the condition of clothing in Soviet Russia, where the state makes all the pants and all the vests and all the coats. No wonder Malenkov's suits fit the way they do. I bet Malenkov would like to be Malik and get over here where he could get some good American tailoring. The right to property is personal, but the use of property is socially conditioned. Though we may own it, nevertheless, we may not do with it whatever we please. For example, I have a horse. You know, if I just get a little worse, I can have one of my drawings in the Modern Art Museum. I have a horse. Now, may I use that horse as I please? Over here is a garden. And these are vegetables. That's a cabbage head. Though I can show title to my horse, may I use my horse as I please? May I send it over to your garden and eat your vegetables? Certainly may not. My personal rights to property are limited by society. I may have a wine cellar. That's a bottle. And here's a school. School. May I invite all of the children over to my wine cellar and put them in a state of amiable incandescence? The wine cellar might be mine, but I may not use it as I please. A girl has a shotgun. Can she use the shotgun as she pleases? You can't get a man with a gun. You can immediately see that there are two possible errors that can creep into economics. One would be the error of saying, we insist upon personal rights to the exclusion of social use. What would that be? That would be monopolistic capitalism, so prevalent in the last century, in which the capitalist said, I own this property, I want no church, I want no Bible, I want no moral law, I want no state, I want no society telling me what I can do with my money. And that resulted in the concentration of wealth in the hands of the few, the impoverishment of the masses, a system to a great extent that was broken up, thanks be to God, rightly by the advent of labor unions. But that could be the error, insisting on the right, forgetting the use. And the other error of insisting on the social use and forgetting the personal rights is obviously communism, in which all property belongs to the state and a man has no personal rights whatever. Then the state owns all the chickens, all the eggs, all of the hens, and it has a state cook that makes an omelet, and you eat the omelet whether you like your eggs that way or not. These are the two economic systems that are both wrong simply because they violated a basic principle of property. Now we come to the application of some of our principles. And the first application has to do with individuals. Every individual is entitled to personal property, to returns on that property. He is entitled to enough personal property to care for himself, for his family, to give them security for the future, as well as an education. All that is over and above that, in the truest sense of the term, wealth that is superfluous, he owes to the poor. He cannot say the personal pronoun mine in the same way the bed on which he sleeps, as he can say mine of his second yacht. His right diminishes as it gets to superfluity, and social needs then begin to emphasize themselves. Now that, incidentally, is why, on a program such as this, every single cent that I receive, I give to the poor. Poor of Asia, poor of Africa, poor of Oceania. Do not keep one single cent for personal expenses. My angel doesn't get anything. He doesn't even get his union dues. Do you know why? He doesn't belong to a union. He has no body. He couldn't even wear a union suit. And all of this money goes to care, as we cared last year, for 65 million people. Aged, sick, lepers, 95% of whom, incidentally, were non-Christians. I'm not entitled to that superfluity. If God has given me a gift, the gift of proclaiming His truth, and the other gifts that are related to it, and the opportunity of talking to you on television, I may not use those God-given rights just in order that I may increase wealth. Now, I owe that to someone else, and if I use that for myself, God would take away my gifts. Why, if you sent me a dime for my work, say, that's not a bad idea. Will you? Don't ask for return, then we won't have an overhead of a stamp. Thanks. God love you. All right. Now, the second principle. Suppose a man is the head of an industry. He is entitled again to all that is necessary for himself, for his family, for their security, and for his station in life. Then what about the superfluity? He may use that superfluity to pour it back again into his business in order to increase employment and aid the social good. That man is then doing a work of munificence and liberality and is to be praised for it. Then we come to our third application. The third application is to a corporation. Because many of the corporations of today are made up of both real and token property. When one speaks of property, one cannot anymore just speak of individual property. These tremendous industrial organizations are part of our modern life, and we do not wish to have them destroyed. The problem is, how apply the basic principles of property to those who are linked up with corporations? First of all, any man who has stock in a corporation is entitled to returns on that stock. It is rightfully and lawfully his. He has aided in the organization by giving money capital, and in justice is entitled to return. How about the worker? The worker does not give any cash, but he gives something more. He gives his life. Not just this day's work and that day's work, for which he receives a wage, but the sum of all of the days, the rearing of his family, the beginning and the end of his physical existence. He is also entitled to some part of the social wealth which he helps to create, just as the stockholder is entitled to something. Therefore, there ought to be in corporations some form of co-ownership in which a worker would receive some part of the profits which he has helped to produce. Certainly the man who gave money and who clips coupons is entitled to his, but the worker also is entitled to some share in that wealth. Need not be given in the form of stock alone, but at any rate, some form of co-management, some form of co-ownership, in which the bond will deepen between himself and the industry where he works, in which he will feel some stability, in which he will no longer be working for someone, but in which he will be working with someone. No one class is entitled to take all of the profits. And this plan here, will the stockholders like it? No, not all the stockholders will like it, because they will say, I will not be able to use my scissors. I will not get all the returns that I would like on my money. They may get more, simply because the workers will be then working on something that is their own. Will the labor leaders like the plan? No, not all of them, because they would lose some of their privileged position. And unfortunately, some of the labor leaders are interested only in extracting increased purchasing power from industry instead of giving some form of co-ownership to the workers. And certainly the Marxists will not like it either, because they want to take over the whole interest so that neither capital nor labor will have a share. Believe me, a man is free in the inside because he has an immortal soul. He can say, I am my own. And a man is free on the outside because he can call property his own. He can say, this is my own. History reveals that never has there been any tyranny, never has there been any slavery in a country where there has been a wide distribution of property. But wherever you find a refusal to allow a man to own or co-own the things on which he works, as you find, for example, in the Soviet Union, there you find tyranny, there you find despotism, there you find slavery. Wherever there is property, there is power. Wherever there is property, there is a sense of responsibility. Hence, what we would like to see is a great wider diffusion of property, so that a man will own his own home. A man will own in some way, at least, co-own the place where he works. He can have a responsibility, therefore, toward that industry and feel himself free, as we said, on the inside, because he has an immortal soul, and free on the outside simply because he is responsible in the place where he works. This is freedom. This is responsibility. This is democracy.
People of all faiths recognized Bishop Fulton J. Sheen as one of the greatest communicators of the 20th century. He was born in El Paso, Illinois, in May of 1896. As a young boy, he knew he wanted to be a priest. He served as an altar boy at St. Mary's Cathedral in Peoria, Illinois. At St. Viator College, his education and debating skills taught him the skills he used throughout his life. His unique ability at being natural and at ease in...
This morning I was trying to cross Fifth Avenue, and every time I tried to cross with the light, cars were turning. And that happened for 2 lights. And there was a man alongside of me. He was getting more angry with every light. His friend had gotten across somehow or other, and he shouted over to him across. He said, how did you ever get over there? He said, I was born here. You remember Fred Allen's story? If you've ever been to Rome, you would understand it better. But in Rome, there are about 400 churches. Traffic is terrible. Fred Allen said that they have a church on one corner in Rome into which you go to pray that you'll get across safely. They have a church on the other side. You go in to thank God that you made it. Well, this is about trips. And the basic idea is really that we have very good instincts, we mortals. And if the good ones are repressed, they come out in a curious way. but they are always present. Let's take just a few examples. What is communism? Communism is the kingdom of God secularized. Instead of the regnancy of Christ, there's the regnancy of the party. When men forgot confession of guilt and sin, instinct was still there. So we developed the psychoanalytic couch to explain away the guilt. Then the Trinity. This circumincession of life and truth and love. When men lost that concept of God, we still had to have the Trinity. And do you know what the first atomic bomb was called that was exploded at Los Alamos? Operation Trinity. Energy, mass, velocity. I might go on giving other examples, but suffice now to say that what are the alienated youth seeking for but mysticism? And they're trying to arrive at the ultimate, at some peace, some contact with perfect goodness and love by other means than those that are rational. So I'm going to show you the difference now between the use of psychedelic drugs and mysticism. They're somewhat the same. Same in the broad sense that mysticism is the search for God and psychedelic is a drug as a way of escaping the earthly. Here is the first difference between the two. The psychedelic drug, and this is the way the hippies explain it, is a flight into the unconscious. Mysticism is into the conscious. First of all, it's a flight into the unconscious. We know that from all that we've read about it. Now, this cannot be a very sound basis for seeking peace. In one of the universities of this country, in the state of Missouri, psychedelic drugs were given to 150 schizophrenic patients. It didn't help any of them. Matter of fact, 3 of them became worse. The man who invented the psychedelic drugs, Dr. Hoffman of Switzerland, said, I lost all concept, unconsciousness of space and time, and I went crazy. And he was out of his mind for some time. Then it's an attempt to achieve a peace and a union with the ultimate through passivity. Man never does anything when he's purely passive. He has to be active. For example, in one of the tests that was made of youth, it was said that, no, we become creative when we take this drug. Something happens to us. So they gave it to men who prided themselves on being poets, musicians, and writers. Under the influence of the drug, they were told to create. The writings, the music, the poetry were given to men who knew music and prose and poetry. And they said they were unintelligible. But those who took the drug said, oh no, we felt that we were very creative. So this is no way, as you see, to ever attain the ultimate by going into the unconsciousness. We're ever to be creative, we have to be active. We have to use our senses. Now take, for example, mystics. St. Francis never lost touch with nature. He called fire, water, his brother and his sister. Teilhard de Chardin, great scientist who has written on mysticism, kept his reason about him. And we may give a telecast on it sometime so that he saw the whole universe being pervaded through and through with divine wisdom, with Christ as the beginning and Christ as the end. But it was through consciousness. The mystics have kept the universe, kept their reason, kept their senses, and looked for truth. There's no search for truth in the unconsciousness. The mystic knows very well that in order to seek truth, he has to be conscious. He knows that if he's ever to draw a real giraffe, he has to give it a long neck. If he's ever to draw a triangle, he has to give it 3 sides. It's the truth that makes you free. And he seeks his mysticism consciously along the lines of truth. And the universe for him is something he stays with, doesn't get away from it by being drugged. So that to the saint, the universe is a kind of scaffolding up through which souls climb to the kingdom of God. And when the last soul shall have climbed up there, then the scaffolding will be torn down, burnt with fervent fire, not because it's base, but simply because it has done its work. This is the real way to achieve peace and union with the ultimate. Now there's a second difference. I don't think we're going to use our angel this particular telecast, and he's very happy about it because he's mystical himself. A second difference is that the psychedelic drug makes people not only unconscious, it also makes them anti-human. Anti-human. Now here we come to something in psychedelic drugs which is really frightening. Frightening. Did you know that babies are born of psychedelic parents who have the syndrome that is known as cri de chat? Did you know that the babies do not cry? They have the cry of cats. Cats. Think of it. Is this the way to peace? Six out of 8 of the psychedelics who produced children had damaged chromosomes. Now, there are 3 ways of damaging the chromosomes in human generation. One is by excessive use of X-rays, the other is by radiation, and the third is by psychedelic drugs. The psychedelic drugs were given to rats. The rats produced a progeny that was so horrible that the scientists couldn't believe it, and they repeated the experiment, and they produced the same horrors. Babies that are born of psychedelic parents sometimes have a head very much larger on one side than another. Is this the way to peace? Is this the way to happiness? And it's anti-human from another point of view. Here's the testimony of a doctor. Dr. Sidney Cohen. Dr. Sidney Cohen says that the contents of a two-suiter piece of luggage will hold enough psychedelic drugs to disable every person in the United States. If it's used by the military, the inhabitants of the city will become so bemused that they will give themselves away to an aggressor. A saboteur could carry enough in an overcoat pocket to produce serious temporary effects on all the inhabitants of a megapolis if he could only distribute it equally. The next day, after having infected the people with psychedelic drugs, Dr. Cohen said they would be very willing to turn themselves over to a new management. Girl here in New York, Christmas Eve party, took some DMT for the first time. Had to put her in a straitjacket. 6 months afterwards, every time she saw a camera, you thought it was an eye. It is a kind of an eye, isn't it? And her prognosis is not that she will ever become better. The anti-human is no approach. Peace. Now, what is the mystical approach? The mystical approach is ethical, not non-ethical, not driving people into the subconscious. Rather, it produces, the ethical produces in people a love of neighbor. And the more the mystics achieve desire, or rather achieve unity with this ultimate, the more kind they are to everyone else. There's no desire, for example, to destroy a next generation. Take, for example, the Indian mystic, Dr. Singh. Dr. Singh went into Tibet, and he was with a guide going over the Himalayas. And they sat down tired and exhausted and cold in the snow, and Dr. Singh says, I think I hear someone moaning down there in the crevice. And the Tibetan said, well, don't be silly, we can't help him. We're almost dead ourselves. Dr. Singh said, I'm going to do it anyway. So he dragged himself down to the crevice, found someone had fallen in. He dragged him out and dragged him to the village at the bottom of the mountain, and he became rejuvenated. That is to say, Dr. Singh, by his act of charity. He had given himself for neighbor. This was the way mysticism came out in him. Not neglecting the human, but by serving it. And what happened? When he came back, he found that his friend who was saving his life had lost it. He was frozen to death. So this is the second difference. Now we come to the third, which gives the title to this telecast. Psychedelic drugs give us the short trip to this so-called ultimate, whatever it is. And true mysticism gives us the long, hard haul and pull. That's the difference. Why is it so many youths are fond of this short trip. We live in an instant age. So few are growing up. They're possessed of infantilism. What's infantilism? Infantilism is that peculiar psychological mood that all infants have because they will not tolerate any delay between their need and their satisfaction. When a baby wants to be fed, he wants to be fed now, right now. That's why fathers and mothers walk the floor at night. Well, some of these babies grow up. They want to be better. They want to achieve ultimate peace immediately. Everything today has to be instant. We got instant coffee. Take a roll age. You've been to a dinner and you've been stuffed and overstuffed eating. There's instant relief. Instant relief. You're ugly and husband notices the gray hair. Your neighbors are talking about it. A little bottle. A little bottle of Free-All. And instantly, oh, boys, the men are all running around you to dance. And it's all done instantaneously. Then the poor wife, the husband said, come on, dear, let's go to a dance. I can't go to a dance. I'm just dragged out. She's got exhausted blood. Lo and behold, he gives her something, and she's out to the dance, now dances them all. Immediacy is the cry of our age. And attempting to achieve wisdom, knowledge, peace, union with the ultimate by the short trip is impossible. You simply cannot put a bomb under a baby and make it a man. Why do they carry plucked flowers? Because they can't wait for them to grow. They don't know what it means to plant, to nourish, to prune. Nature isn't this way. Athletics are not this way. Musical artists are not that way. They can't take a drug and become artists overnight. It's immediacy that's ruining our age. The long haul. Oh. Goodness gracious, anybody who's trying to be good, it's a struggle. In fact, there's no such thing as always walking uphill. You go up for a time, and then you level off on a plateau, and then you run into thorns and all kinds of obstacles. Character is made of the long pull. Inside of every block of marble is a figure. Great sculptors can draw that figure out. How does the sculptor do it? Well, he first of all, with his hammer and his chisel, knocks off great, huge blocks of marble, of egotism, things that spoil the form. And then the more gentle chips, and finally the brush of a hand. Drawing out a figure so perfect, for example, that Michelangelo, when he created his Moses, looked at it. To him it was so satisfying that he struck the base of the statue of Moses and said, "Speak!" But it took the long pull for the sculptor to do that. If a violin were conscious, and the violinist began tuning the strings, and tightening, 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 The strings conscious might say, don't do that, it hurts. Why do we have this long pull of effort? And the violinist would say, oh, in order that there might be the greater melody, that's the reason. On the tomb of Duns Scotus in Cologne, there's the inscription, Vis mortuus semel sepultus. He died twice, he was buried once. Died twice, why? Because he was undergoing this long pull, process of mortification in order to achieve peace. Remember when the Greeks came to visit our blessed Lord? We do not know what they said, but I've always suspected they said, you come to Athens. We accept wise men, we killed only one. We poisoned Socrates, and we have regretted it ever since. Come to our city. And what did our Lord say? Unless the seed falling to the ground die, it will not spring forth. If it dies, it'll produce fruit 100-fold. In other words, my dear Greeks, there's no shortcut to wisdom, to peace, to happiness, or anything else. There's the dying to self. There's the long pull and that arduous haul. But during that haul, there's peace and there's joy, and life is always beautiful.
Bishop Sheen will return in a moment.
Fulton J. Sheen is indeed a man for all seasons. He walked a paced beat, allowing us to glimpse his nature and ponder its worth and to enjoy its presence. Bishop Sheen authored over 90 books. He broadcast countless radio and television programs